you go. One aileron just fell on out. So now what you got to do, now that you got the aileron out of its wing, make sure you mark it. Make sure you know where it goes. Got a good indication where this one goes because of the fact it's got an upper horn. So the upper horn is to connect to the upper aileron. So now I got to go around here and finish sheeting in the aileron hole, and then do the same to the front of the aileron. Sheet that over, and it's considered an aileron. Well, really, it's considered an aileron already. Just got to close up everything, and go to the other side, do the same. Get this wing ready to cover. It'll just, the hinges of the ailerons will just go right into the fabric. But here we are with our very first aileron complete. It's a butcher job. The first one usually is. I'm not too happy about this one, but I think the fabric could cover up most of it. I'm being a little bit picky, but there's your first aileron. That's it. All you had to do is just sheet this in. So now this is all closed up. I put 1/16 balsa across there, and then I put about a, oh hell, I think I put about a 3/16 on the front of the aileron. I went a little bit thicker on the front of the aileron, just for strength. And that's it. That's the first one. Just going to fit right in there, and then you're going to hinge it like we did the tail. Exactly like you did the tail. You flip it up, and then hinge it all right there, and then we're going to flip it on back down. It's going to look pretty. So first one done, and here we go with number 2. Okay, here we are looking at the forward side of the wing. Currently, I am doing a permanent attach on the outboard struts. I went ahead and decided before I cover this and accidentally get any dope in any of my crevices, I'm going to go ahead and permanently install these, and that's what I'm doing right now. Both ailerons are cut out and complete. I'm ready to install. So I'm doing all of the prep work I believe I have to do prior to actually covering these wings. So strut brackets are going to go in. They're nothing but brass strips. They're curing up now. And I still have to do a little body fillering around those too. You can get a close-up shot. You see that hole on the forward side here and on the back side of both struts. I'm going to do a little body filling in there. Make that look like it hides, or hide it anyway. I'm just going to fill it in. And I think we might be about ready to cover. Thought I'd go ahead and take a picture of this one. This is the third one. This one is almost done, aileron wise, and then I just have one more to do. And almost all 4 ailerons are basically done, but this is a fairly clean one here. They're getting cleaner as I go. I did this one last night. Shouldn't take that long to do the last one. So they start picking up speed. But all I had to do is basically just cut that right out of there. See that? Now you got your slot. I still have to enclose that area there, and I think I already have that piece. So I'm just going to glue that in, fair that off. The front of the aileron itself is done. And go on with the last one, and this wing here is actually, it's ready to cover. Ready to cover. Both of them are ready to cover. I mean, no, matter of fact, now that I mention it, this strut slot here, I still have to do the same thing as I did on these over here. Forward wing, I did this yesterday, and I should be able to take it all apart now. The struts are on it. I left the struts on it so it could dry that way overnight. And then all I really have to do now is to take them back off, sand this nice and flat and smooth, and that lower wing is ready to do. It's ready to cover. The upper wing should follow right behind it, and this plane's really coming close to an end. Really coming close. I keep saying that though, you know, but I guess that's a modeler's term now, because I still got front cowling to do. I still got the fairings to do. But as a model as a whole, it's pretty well been put together, assembled in one way, and taken back apart. As you can see, if you pull out, when I build, most of the parts are underneath the box. That's the box that the model came in. So a lot of the parts, you keep everything in one spot, and then they kind of like just filter themselves around the room. Then you got, those are all the pants, landing gears done, and then the Bonanza wing tends to become a shelf. It's probably end up scoring some wing damage on my Bonanza. But you can see that Bonanza, if you can, now that you've seen this whole model go together, you can almost look at this and say, yeah, that Bonanza wing is damn near done. It's ready to do. I'm coming to the point of the same thing on the Bonanza wings. It's been like this for a long time. All I really have to do is just cover those wings. I guess I'm just trying to get the balls enough to do it. Plus, I had to fix quite a bit of damage on it. This was my very first model. Very, very first. And I caused some, like out here you can see, that's some pretty heavy, I way over sanded. I got really carried away with sanding blocks. I still got some damage up front and all that. This wing was a very highly experimental. It's pretty heavy, but I don't think that's because of what I've done. I think it's just a naturally heavy plane. Plus it's got the retracts in it. But enough of the Bonanza shot. I thought I'd just go ahead and take. At one time I thought I had, there's another trick over there. This is just one of the tricks that you slowly, I got this piece on and I'm waiting for it to cure right now, so I thought I'd show right here. You really can't, I guess in the color viewfinder there, or the color view, you might see just a fine line right there. I can't get a close-up view because the camcorder won't focus to it. That's 5-minute epoxy. I had a mismatch of many different kinds. I had a mismatch of the bow, I had the mismatch of the corner, I had a wave in the middle, and I really didn't want to sand it down, and all I needed was just it to be square and smooth, so when I did put my aileron in there, it was like a clean transition. Now it's nice and flat. I mean, it's like a nice clean gap. You know, the cleaner it is, the better it looks and all that kind of good stuff. So that's just a trick of 5-minute epoxy. I've used 5-minute epoxy in some pretty off-the-wall circumstances. It's almost like liquid shim. I guess you'd have to work with that kind of stuff all the time in order to kind of get the idea. It's almost like working with a seal. Here's another example. When I put the tail wheel assembly on, you can notice the screw holes. I filled the screw holes with 5-minute epoxy and then bondoing them over. And I mean, you can see them now, but once I get done painting and all that, you won't see any of that. I mean, it's a gloss finish right over the top of that, fuel-proofed, and the screws won't be coming back out naturally without being drilled, but the plane itself might get drilled first. So you never know. But these are just a couple of epoxy tricks, like I was doing on the wheel pants. I was doing the same thing on landing gear. It can be used for body fillers, but you got to keep in mind, the more you do this, when you do these little tricks right here, try and do it to a minimum, because you are adding weight. Every little bit that you do there, you're going to add weight. But so far, when you're up and around the 60 size airplanes and you're talking about a 62 stroke, that's a fairly good sized motor. It'll tend to drag most any of this 5-minute epoxy around. It'll drag it right into a fence. So, you know, weigh it out, because it is to be fun. And that little bit on the tail wheel right there, you ain't gonna notice that after you put an 11, almost 12-inch prop on an airplane that's going to be dragging this thing through the air. No big. Now, just keep in mind what I was saying about the weight. This trainer airplane right here, my Trainer 60, it was built with an OS61 SP on it. There's an SF. What the hell is that? Is that an SF or an SP? SF. It's an SF. That motor was built on it. That plane was on its wheels. I was flying it on its wheels. And then I added the floats. And I'm still flying it with the same motor. So this is what I mean. The floats. Now consider the floats are another, I think something like 20 ounces complete right there. You're probably talking 20 ounces a piece. Just in the floats alone. And then you're talking all the gears and everything. You did step up one size prop from 11.7 to a 12.7. So you get a little more thrust off of the prop. But that's mostly just to get you off of the water. So the plane isn't as fast with the floats. But it will get airborne. So you weigh out your differences with the weights. You learn as you go. Okay, here we are, having a good time. You can see it didn't take much time if you're following the time on the bottom of the screen there. It didn't take much time to really, from start to finish, because I didn't really work my butt off to get all the ailerons done. They're done. All I really have to do is start hooking stuff up. I'm laughing right now because there's some gal on the scanners chasing around a guy with a baseball bat because he cut her off in traffic. That's good. She's gonna kick his ass. So, what you got right now is, we'll turn all this noise off. If I can find my little pointer here. All I have to do now is I'm going to set my ailerons. I don't want to end up getting in these pictures here. That's the bottom wing. Got two ailerons sitting in front of it. Everything is complete. So we're going to go ahead and finish prepping. You already saw earlier, but I had done some more modification on the outboard struts. I got the struts in there. I did all the body filling on it. Then I went back and I did some 5-minute epoxy filling in there. What's so cool about 5-minute epoxy is, as it cures, it's curing up in 5 minutes. So as it cures, it heats up. And as it heats up, it becomes very liquid. Very liquidy, or liquid form, or however. It heats up there for about a good 20-30 seconds. It's got a real good heat to it, so you kind of learn how to play with that. Then it starts thickening up as it gets hotter. So it's at a real thin point, and then it slowly starts thickening up. Well, when it's in its real fluid form, you can get it to fill in some really small places. That's why it's so neat to do with body filling and forming and fairing and all that kind of good stuff. So that's what I did. I did my finals on my outboard struts on the bottom wing. I have not done this on the upper wing yet, but the ailerons are complete on the upper wing. So what I'm going to do to prep this wing right now is I'm going to fit these ailerons in their space. So we'll pull out. You got your aileron in your space. What I want to do is I want to fit this in here, because I'm going to hinge these, probably blocking your view. I'm going to go ahead, fit those in there, and you want about a 1/16 gap all the way around, especially on the inboard and outboard side of that flight control, to make it look true, make it look pretty. So I'm going to put myself, I'm going to take some masking tape and I'm going to make some hinges, temporary hinges to hang the aileron on there. I'm going to measure my gaps out, do some sanding, make sure everything's where I want it. And then that masking tape is going to be a temporary hinge. I'm going to flip that aileron up on top of that wing. And that's what I'm going to say, okay, this is where I want my aileron. I'm going to flip it up on top. And I'm going to go ahead and at that location, I'll probably either pin it, keep it there, and that'll be my simulated hinge line for when I cover it. So I probably lost you all together, and let's start over. I'm prepping myself right now to cover the wing. I'm going to have to cover the bottom side of this wing first, which is going to be the beginning of my hinges for my ailerons. So I'm going to go ahead and true up my ailerons in their box, in their aileron box. I'm not really, what would you call that? An aileron space, location, station. When I feel as though it is true and where I want it to be, I'm going to tape it at the hinge point, give it a simulated hinge, and when I make the decision to actually do the covering, I'm going to flip that aileron up, and it's going to lay on top of the wing exactly where I want it to, so when I lay the fabric over and hinge it, it's going to stay there. You know what I mean? Just like we did when we did the tail, same thing. This is going to be a little more difficult because the tail was out in the open. It was easy to do it out in the open. This is where you start learning how to use an iron very creatively. This is really, when you get around the nooks and crannies, the corners, stuff like that, that's where experience comes in the use of an iron. So that's why a lot of guys go with the monocoats and all that. They don't want to go through all this trouble of doing the dope and soak, because I'm not only going to iron all this stuff on, but then I'm going to go ahead and dope and soak and fine tune, and dope and soak and fine tune, and la la la. Where a lot of guys don't have patience for that shit, so they just go ahead and do the monocoat. It's covered, it's colored. Let's go fly it and crash it and brag to our guys that, you know, our buddies, that we built a plane. No, I built a piece of art, and when I drill it into the ground, it is now a piece of art in pieces. So here we go. Let's move on. Quit wasting tape. Okay, I thought it would be easiest since I've totally confused you. Here I am a little while later, after I have this aileron trued. So what you have is your aileron. It's back in its circumstance, or it's back where it belongs. I have, you want to look along, I have two 1/16 shims on each side. They sit in there loose, well, semi-snug, but not tight, because that is going to be the space that you want to maintain for the flight control when it's being working in its working condition. So 1/16, fairly between snug and loose, you know, so they stick in there. They don't really go anywhere. The forward, now if you were going to do a hinge situation, if you were just going to do a regular hinge, you might want to consider about truing this up, the leading edge between there, because that's going to be left open and then you're going to see it. This particular aileron right here in front of you is the worst aileron out of all four, because it was the very first one. It was a butcher job, so the leading edge of that is not exactly pretty. They get prettier as the last one was very pretty. It was easy to do. So since I'm going to use fabric, I'm going to cover that up so you ain't going to see it anyway, so I don't really care about the leading edge, except for the fact you want to make sure you do have a gap all the way up there. You want to make sure it's enough gap for you to use that as a hinge line. You don't want any binding, so you want at least a 1/16 gap up there, minimum. And then, you know, I'm going to cover it up, so if it goes beyond that and it's all wavy and ugly, I don't care. So, I thought it'd be easiest to show you. Now I have the gaps on each side. The front is where I want it. I'm going to throw. You want to make sure your trailing edges are nice and true. Okay, you want it to look like it would as a finished product. So there you go. It's you know, that's as a finished product, sitting where it's at. Throw a piece of tape across there. Kind of move things a little bit. This is only a demonstration. This isn't final, because I have to You know, keep in mind, I have to do some prep work for when I do cover. When I actually go for covering, I have to go through the process of applying the stick glue to the frame, get out the iron, cut the fabric. So there's a process to covering. So what I'm showing you is kind of prepping for an aileron. As for the covering is going to go naturally. So, okay, there we have our simulated hinge line. So that's so-called where it's going to hinge on. Take your little spacers out. So now you have a 1/16 gap on each side, nice and true. See, it's going to, as it operates, it's going to pivot on that point. And then, like I did on the elevator, I didn't do it to the rudder, so like I did on the elevator, I'm just going to go ahead. That's my so-called, see, you can see the trailing edges are fairly true. I'm just going to flip that right up on top, and I'm going to apply the lower fabric. When I apply the lower half of the wing fabric, which is going to be first, I'm going to go ahead and hinge that just like I did the elevator. And then same thing when I go for the top. And then what you get in effect is like you did on the fabric. See how that area is closed? It's all closed. That not only reduces drag, it gives you a higher performance off of that aileron. When that aileron moves, it has no bleed through. There's no, so when it's sitting at neutral, the only bleed through you have is coming through these 1/16 cracks on the side. Otherwise, this is dead air underneath there. You don't have any bleed through, which reduces your drag. And then when you ask this plane to turn, it's going to turn on a dime. Shit, turn on a nickel, turn on. Damn, man. When you see this thing fly, I hope it remains flying. This is going to be a screaming little plane. So you get the idea. And the horn that you see here is going to be the horn that goes to the upper wing, which also has an aileron. So now you have two right-hand ailerons, two left-hand ailerons. So that means this plane is going to fly or turn basically, I would say, almost twice as fast, but that might be exaggerating. You're probably giving yourself, because if this was a full, now remember when we originally started this, if I was just going to have bottom ailerons, my bottom ailerons would come way into here. This entire trailing edge of this wing would be an aileron, which would probably turn almost as quickly, but not as cleanly. You know what I mean? It would turn as quickly. I mean, you would see a nice quick roll, but the fact that it's only turning off of one wing, that means the upper wing is kind of dragging along. It's not really working with the turn. It's kind of following along on the path. So it's almost like a slave wing, if you really got to get into the physics of it. But it would be, the upper wing would become a slave wing, and it would kind of follow the master wing. All it would really have was, it would fly, but it wouldn't help in the turn. Now, consider yourself flying along with just this wing, and this wing is just turning left, right, and it's kind of, it's a nice, clean, quick turn. Add a wing to that that's going to follow it. Now you're going to create some drag. So now this bottom wing isn't going to be turning as efficiently as it would on its own. Now that it's got another wing following it, now that's going to take up some of its efficiency, and it's going to slow down in its turns. It's not going to turn as well. But if you add that upper aileron, and now that upper wing is working with the lower wing, now all of a sudden, you're talking about flipping on a dime. So you really got to sit back and look at what you're doing and the reasons why you're doing it. I'm adding the dual aileron on this not only because I've never done it before, it's my very first biplane, but I want it to be a very quick turning plane. Now, if you were going to build this model, you felt as though that would be too quick for you, then you have the option of going just bottom aileron, and all it is it's a nice, clean, flying biplane. Yes, you have a biplane, nice and clean, and you don't have to worry about crashing and burning, because when I ask this thing to turn, like say when you're taking off on takeoff, you don't want to turn too quick on takeoff, because as you're turning, you're losing altitude, which means you could be losing your forward momentum, which means you could be coming down really quick. So again, I'm wasting more tape on babbling, but I'm coming to the point of actually covering all of this up. So I'm babbling now while I have it all open, because as I cover this up, you are not going to see any of this. Again, let's see if I pull out a little bit more. Oh, camera won't let me pull out. On the same note, not only am I tying in the aileron out there, outboard. Let's swing outboard again. And you can see the inner. These are all your linkages. So you have to keep in mind what you just did on this aileron. You're maintaining the trailing edge because of your linkages. You rigged your linkages to that. That is your neutral position. And that was true neutral before you cut it out. So keep that in mind. That's your linkage situation. That's why you want to remain so true, because of your linkage hookups to your bell cranks. Remember everything moving here. And since we're going to dope and soak this, you're going to get some dope that's going to bleed through the fabric. And you don't want that dope that bleeds through to end up locking up your linkages, because you're going to cover all this up. So say I cover up this area right here with some fabric, and then I go ahead and just slop some dope across it. Well, that's fabric. That dope is going to drip down into these areas and end up, you're going to start mussing some stuff up here, and then you're going to wish you didn't try the dope and soak. That's why most people just go to a monocoat where you can just iron across it. There's no dope involved, and it's covered in, that's as far as I'm concerned, that's almost lazy, because I'm a modeler. I'm not building this up to bring it out to show the guys what I can do. And I care less what the guys think. It's what I think about the model, and I think it's a rather pretty model. So you want to decide on how you're going to cover these areas up, or create caution zones. Same with the linkages in the center here. All I'm really going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take some masking tape. And this is how I did Trainer 60. Plug the areas you don't want covered. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to throw masking tape across those open boxes. I'm going to trim that masking tape as close as I can to the edge of that box. So the masking tape is covering that area from the dope, but when I go ahead to cut that hole back out, I'm not you don't want your fabric. See how the masking tape is way out here? Now if I just left that, the fabric's going to go over the top of that, and then it's not going to adhere to the balsa. So I can dope all that in that, and then when I go to cut all this out, that's going to be a weak point, because now when I go to pull this masking tape back out, it's going to want to come all the way out underneath the fabric. So I'm going to cover that up and get as close as I can to the hole, just to cover the hole so the dope don't get in there. And then when I go to cut it back out, all I'm basically doing is just kind of opening that hole back up. You get the idea? And that's how I did Trainer 60, and it works out. Same thing, you're going to have to plug the holes and take it very slowly. I mean, don't get ahead of yourself, because you lock up any of these linkages, boy, are you going to be pissed. I know I would be. And same with the strut areas, any of these canals, because you got to consider your struts have just been rigged in there to fit in there exactly the way it sits now. If you fill that hole up with any kind of epoxy or any kind of paint, anything, you're going to add to your troubles. So mask off anything you don't want your dope to get into, and figure out a way of getting it back out. Either I'm going to go ahead and cover this over with fabric and then cut through it, or I'm going to go ahead and put my fabric up to that point, have a fine line on my fabric, and then that hole will always remain open. Depends on the technique you want to use on the covering. Myself, what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to go right over that hole. You can feel the hole. You know the hole is there. Just when you go to dope it, make sure that you're really careful in that area when you dope it. Reason why I would cover over it and keep on going is the fact that the fabric's going to want to shrink as you hit it with the iron. You want that piece to be, the fabric piece to be almost as a whole, because you saw what happened on the tail, the separation on the tail when I did the covering on it. You'll end up, the fabric will start pulling itself away from this. It'll start looking sloppy. You know, you want anything that's going to be sloppy, you want to be on the bottom side of that wing. So if anybody wants to see any of your flaws, you can flip the plane over and look at all my flaws and say, oh, look at that, that looks like shit, but it's what on top that counts. Unless you were going to show it. Now, if I was going to go ahead and show this, I'd be really concerned. And I'm even considered showing it. So every time I build a model, I try to do showroom quality. That's just because I'm a picky individual. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to have a good time. I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody except myself that I can do it. Anybody that's watching this video right now, it don't really matter to me if you're impressed with what you're seeing or not. All I'm trying to do is show you how I'm doing it. If you don't like the way I'm doing it, or you have another idea on how to do it, go for it. It's a very personal hobby. So, again, we're wasting tape. Let's just go ahead and mask off. And I say we go ahead and start covering it. So you're probably not going to, next time you see this, it's going to be covered. I don't even think I don't have any need to show you the covering of the ailerons or anything, but I'll probably do that anyway. So you're going to start seeing some covering going on here.